Hey, Evangel, I'm Pastor Jordan. I'm here with Pastor Ben and Pastor Rich, and this is the Next Gen Podcast. Hey, everybody, we're so excited to have you with us today. We are tackling a very important topic in church. We are talking about accountability. And we were talking this past week about some things that were going on in church and our young adult group, some things on Sunday, and we just thought it was a really good conversation to have. But we wanted to kind of kick things off. Pastor Rich has a really good statistic that I think would be a great start to the conversation. Why don't you go ahead and share that?
Yeah, so according to Lifeway research, 70% of Christians that they surveyed said that an accountability partner or accountability in any form helped them overcome a sin issue in their life.
70%.
70%.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, that's a very high statistic. I if you need any more proof to look for accountability, I don't know.
Well, before we started it, I wanted to say is like, I think sometimes we hear accountability partner and it can kind of get lumped into like the Christianese, like this is the season of life that you're in. And people hear it, and I think especially younger people, and they're just like, yeah, okay. No. Accountability is like for real. Yeah,
and it doesn't even have to be in the format of just you and one other person. It can be in a group. It doesn't have to look like a certain idea, but it can be in many different aspects of life or in ministry. So, Pastor Ben, we want to kind of kick this off, and the statistic I think was a good start. Why is it important?
So I actually had a verse written down about this. It's Proverbs 27:17. It says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Right? So God made us to be in community, and a part of that is, when we are people, like we're all people, when we're living our lives, we struggle to kind of see ourselves sometimes, right? We have a lot of blind spots.
Yep.
Accountability is huge for that. Having people around you that, one, are able to speak into your life, tell you things that you necessarily don't want to hear or things that you need to hear, that separates people that are friends versus people that actually care about you, right? That's the accountability aspect.
Yeah. So last week, May 9th, we released an episode on spiritual community. Would like to encourage you to go check that out if you haven't done so yet, because it talks to some of the things that we're alluding to today. But really, I thought of 1 Thessalonians 5:11, therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. So we see all throughout Scripture that accountability is an important thing. We see that there's relationships in Scripture, people that are following Jesus, people that are in relationship with God. There's always accountability there. It's Moses and Joshua. It's, Saul always has Silas with him, or he has others with him, or Timothy, or whatever. And so I guess I just wanted to talk about some of the benefits of accountability. What are some potential benefits that you could see, Pastor Rich?
Yeah, so as we were talking for the podcast, accountability, not in a general sense, but in the kind of Christian sense of like an accountability partner, right? That's something that's a little bit new for me, and I've already seen the benefits because honestly, it changes the way that I think. Because I am probably both my harshest critic and extremely gracious with myself, if that makes sense.
Most of us are.
Yeah, little stuff. But then now that I've been sharing with, just be transparent with you guys, I've started to see things that I would normally let go.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's the way that I talk. Maybe it's the way that I present myself, like publicly. Like it starts sounding like, man, and it's not even something that we would talk about. But thinking about like, oh, I have accountability. I'm like, if I have someone to help me out with something like this, I kind of don't like this that I do.
Yeah.
And most of my life, I never would have batted an eye.
Yeah.
And so with this, it just gets me thinking in different ways that on my own in isolation, where it's just me, running the ship, I probably never would have thought of it.
Yeah.
So that's been the biggest thing initially for me, is just that complete change of perspective.
Yeah, I think that perspective is important, and I'll share a little bit. When I was a teenager, one of the big parts of my story was pornography, and I am just getting saved, but I'm kind of wrapped in this. And I knew I needed to come out of this, but I needed to do it with somebody. And I can honestly say, I don't think, it was a while ago, but I really don't think I would have been able to get out of it on my own unless I had somebody that I was very honest with, I was very vulnerable with. The people that I met and that I was talking with about this issue had permission to ask me any question at any time. They had full access to my life. And that ability of full access, I think it hinders you from keeping things back.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what discipleship is that tension of giving all to God or keeping some back for yourself. And sin leads us down that path of keeping things back to ourselves. And so when you're vulnerable with somebody, when you're constantly sharing, hey, it was a good weekend, or hey, I really struggled, I was tempted, or this or that. So first of all, it keeps everything out there. And it's great because in that relationship, I'm not judged either. I never felt judged,
Right.
which is really key because otherwise it's just abuse at that point. But, I'm not judged. I know the person is for me. I know the person loves me. I know the person wants to see me successful. But there's got to be some buy-in to the fact of like, we're not just sitting around and be like, oh, messed up again. It's not a big deal, because that's the other thing is like, then it's just a hangout where you're just like, yeah, we're laughing about our sin, There's also got to be that serious element to it as well. And so it's a fine line, but with that vulnerability, with that opening myself up, it gave me what you said, different perspective.
Yeah.
And this person I met with would say, oh, have you considered this? I noticed this pattern. I'd be like, oh, I didn't even notice that. Yeah. And he would bring those things up, and it would just bring spiritual health to me, and it was really good. Pastor Ben, what do you think?
I think, obviously, you touched a lot on vulnerability. I think authenticity is huge. I think when we can be authentic with others and real with others, then it helps us be real with ourselves. I think another piece that I initially didn't write down, but you talking about it brought it up to me. When it comes to struggling with sin or issues like that, when you have an accountability partner, it is very beneficial. Like, say somebody is also struggling through the same things you're struggling with. That's good to have somebody alongside you with it. But I think it is super beneficial when you go to somebody that has already been through that.
Yes.
Right? Somebody that has experienced this already, somebody that has been freed of that sin issue.
Yep.
Having somebody to be able to speak their wisdom from what they got through into your own life and help them. Because, listen, you might struggle with the same thing as me, but the way you got out of it might be different than what I need.
Yeah.
There's still wisdom in that.
Yep.
Right? And there's still that aspect of relationship that you need. So.
Yeah. And I've got a lot of passion for helping people get out of specifically pornography because I saw its destruction in my life as a teenager. And so I think about like people like former alcoholics, people that dealt with anger, people that dealt with, like whatever your thing is. For people that do get on the other end of it, I would encourage you to find somebody that is struggling and share how you got to the other end. Yeah. Just share your story with them because, first of all, this is one thing I discovered too, is I've got a lot of compassion for the people that are dealing with the things I'm dealing with, but I have less compassion for the people that are dealing things that I don't deal with. Yeah. And so because I'm like, oh, I know what that's like to be there. Yeah. But then there's things I don't understand. It's like, so it might actually be a better fit to find somebody, because that's what I did was the guy I was meeting with, and then he went away to college and I had to start with somebody else. But the people that I did that with, that it was so crucial in my life, they were dealing with the same thing. Yeah. So we were discovering and learning together. We were growing together. We were handling that, and then we were just so focused on that mission. As we call Pastor Rich when he sometimes at work we call it his hyper focus. Yep. And we'll be like, Rich, you there? And he's like, what?
You're like, I'm in the room, but I'm not.
Yeah. So, but you got to get hyper focused. You have to get locked in because if you don't get locked in, you're not going to be able to deal with it. So
yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up that aspect of you are so more inclined to help people with that, right? Because for me, I struggled with like mental health struggles, whether it be like depression, that in turn affected my weight and everything. Mm-hmm. And the testimony that I had from that made me, one, super passionate about people that are dealing with that struggle, and that's part of the reason why like the male demographic, I feel like we need more like conversations about mental health.
Yeah.
And also with that too, it opened up a lot of opportunities for people to talk to me about and be like, hey, like you said that you gained a lot of weight when you were depressed and all this, and like, how did you get through that? Yeah. It's like, well, that was God, right? Mm-hmm. And I had people in my life that held me accountable that were like, hey, let's get out of this. Let's fight this depression. Let's fight this mental struggle that you're dealing with. Yeah. So that to me was huge, having somebody older than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that's really, I don't want to say underrated, I feel like it's a little silly of a term, but an underrated aspect of accountability as well is that I have found that there's so much healing just by even just saying it.
Yeah.
Like when you're, like, take pornography, for example, or anything, right? you're in, because this is what I think most American Christians do.
Yep.
They get, they have the sins that they bring to church, but like then you have like, all right, you have your real sins.
Yeah,
that nobody knows about.
Very shame driven. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you're isolated, and then if you can, because I'm sure a lot of people go their whole lives
Sure.
nothing.
Why not?
Right?
Yeah. It's
And
easier in their mind, but of course it's not.
Right? And you finally get to the place where you just say it. And I've been in that place. And when you can just say it, there is so much healing when a Christian in front of you is like, they don't hear that and scoff, or at least they shouldn't. They don't condemn you to be like, okay, let's do something about that.
Yeah.
Like let's press in. And it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Because I really do believe, not to be super duper spiritual, I think the enemy would want nothing more than for us to be alone.
Yeah.
And to keep hiding it. And
You're the only one.
right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Like
Yeah.
no one else struggles with this. Are you even a Christian if you fill in the blank with whatever, alcoholism? It doesn't even have to be addiction. It can be something else. But still, right? I think that's something that should be celebrated. It shouldn't be something that we're afraid of. Is stepping forward. And I think there are some real external elements that can make it harder for somebody to come forward, I think, in our culture. But if you can find somebody that you can trust with anything, and they're going to tell you what you need to hear, I don't think we fully understand the benefits and the ramifications of that.
Yeah. Just to go back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, Ben mentioned authenticity and vulnerability. And accountability doesn't work without vulnerability and authenticity.
Absolutely.
And I know people that have been in accountability relationships, and they're like, well, it doesn't work, well, I still struggle, well, this or that. But they're holding things back.
Yes.
They're not giving the full picture. And I think if you're going to be in accountability, you have to be ready to be vulnerable. You have to be authentic through and through. You cannot hold anything back. And so you really got to pray through that. Who do I trust? Someone that's not... someone that's really going to understand and hear me and protect you, really.
Yes.
Not someone's going to be like, oh, I met with so-and-so and they're going through this, that's not helpful, but you find the right person and then just share with them. I remember I was listening to a sermon once and the guy was talking, he goes, just drag that thing into the light.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like this, this weight hanging on you, and it's trying to keep you in the darkness. Drag it into the light. And it's hard, and it's really hard because you're like, I'm the only one, and this is so shameful, and I would hate for anybody to know this, but I would just really like plead with you and encourage you, like, you're not the only one. Every person's broken. Mm-hmm. And the more I've gone through life, the more I've learned is that some people are just better at hiding it.
Yeah.
Nobody has it together. Nobody does. Not even our lead pastor, and he'd be the first one to tell you that. As much as I look up to him, think, oh, he's got no, all of us. But some people are just better at hiding it, better at dealing with it on the side or whatever. But like, look, man, just take that thing and just drag it into the light. And once you're over the line, once you have that right, and it says in James to confess your sins and you'll be healed. Like, this is
I looked it up as he was talking.
Yeah, James chapter 5, right?
Yep,
yeah.
16.
And so why don't you read that? Just share the whole verse with them.
James 5:16. Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective.
And that's the thing. It's like, that's in the Bible.
Yes.
I mean, people are not over here to beat you up and, I can't believe you do that. People, I think, really want to see restoration, not only in their own lives, but in your life.
And one of the amazing things I think about this verse, and when I think about not specifically evangelist culture, but all kind of like Protestant culture in America, is that we don't have confession as the Catholics do. Right,
yeah.
They go into the booth and they confess their sins, right?
Right.
We don't have that, and I think there is something really powerful that not saying that we should have it, but something we miss out on, because not that they all are authentic when they do that, but they have an opportunity regularly to, in their mind, to go and to hear from another Christian, someone in authority, to forgive them and to pray for them, right? Where I think with us, it's like, oh no, church is like, it's all about us.
Yeah.
It's just us on this island. Our faith is only our own. I think we really, really miss out a lot on James 5 with with just, if you just show up at church, you're not going to get that. You really got to find that.
Yeah.
And if you do, it's both powerful and effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit maybe about some personal examples. And again, I think we get this idea, it has to be you with one person in a coffee shop, or, it has to be just you and a pastor. I think it's, accountability is it's not in the box that we put it in. I think it can take place in many forms. It could be in a group. It can be with a pastor. It can be with a parent or a loved one or a family member or anything like that. But I just want to talk a little bit about some personal examples. Maybe Pastor Ben, you could share for you. In college, you had a good example of.
Yeah, absolutely. In college, my roommate, he started an accountability group, and it started with about 5 people, basically me, my buddy, the one that started it, and then like 2 of our other friends.
Right.
And eventually, like, it was awkward, right? And we just would sit there and talk about what we've been struggling with, what we realized we've been struggling with, things that, whatever that's been going on in our lives currently. And ended up growing to about 30 people from our floor alone.
Wow.
Pastor Rich came to one of them every once in a while. Like, we would invite people to come through to it. And it grew us all closer, right? Like, guys that I probably never would have been friends with, I became friends with because of the vulnerability that we shared, right? And like, I do think a big part of it is what you put in is what you get out of it,
100%.
right? Because if you go and you just are a bystander, there will it's not going to change.
It doesn't work.
But right, yeah, exactly. But like, I saw even in myself that like, if I'm going to level with you guys completely, there was a sin issue in my life at the time that like I had no idea that it was a sin issue until going to that accountability group at like 20 years old. I figured that out, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Like, why is he talking about this?
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, this is an issue. But in turn, with that too, there's still fruit that has come from that, even just the group.
Yes.
Because the group, still have connections with those guys. One of them specifically is a younger guy than me, and we call probably about once a week, and we talk about stuff that like something that I had been through, and I'm able to help him through now as well. Kind of like what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Somebody that has been through it, somebody that has that is older than you, that has more experience, more wisdom. Maybe you don't necessarily need to be older to have more wisdom, but it does help. So that to me was life-changing for me, and that's why I really love the idea of whether it be a group, whether it be individual accountability, you do have to put in that effort as well.
Wisdom comes in different forms too.
Yeah.
Like, I think about wisdom even in the sense of just life experience. Like, even if wisdom comes in the sense of like overcome, like we talked about a little bit earlier, about overcoming a particular sin or dealing with something like that's wisdom. I've learned wisdom from this season of my life or from God working in this. So, age, it does come with age, right? Like we obviously know people that have just gone through life, raised families or whatever, and wisdom has come as a result of that. But even just talking about people that like, hey, I know you and you're young, but you've overcome this, and I see where you are now. Yep. And maybe that's a good marker to kind of say to our audience, like, maybe you're hearing this and you're considering getting involved in accountability. Look at someone that you want to emulate. Like, I don't ever want to have no offense. I don't ever want to have an overweight trainer. Like, if I go to the gym and I'm looking to pick out a trainer, I'm not going to pick the guy that's not in shape. I'm going to pick the guy that I'm like, well, I want to look like him. And so like I look at like other men of God and I'm like, I want to be like him. I want to be the dad that he is. I want to be the husband that he is, because I look and I see the fruit in his life and I want to emulate that. And so that comes in different forms. It doesn't just have to be older. And now God's put you in his life. And so I just love how that works. Pastor Rich, you have something.
Well, just as you were talking about how it can even be a parent, right?
Yeah.
And I was a very idiotic, stupid 16-year-old.
So last year, right?
Yes. No, I was the stupid idiotic part maybe. Still in. But when I was 16, obviously making a lot of dumb decisions, right? And my mom was someone that, because I wasn't always honest with her, but deep down I always knew that if I told her something that I did wrong, I knew that she was going to be there to help me fix it more than me get in trouble.
Right.
Like, would there be consequences? 100%. But I don't know how she did it, but she made it very clear to me and my sister. She was like, if you are going through something, like, do not hide it. Do not be afraid of me.
Yeah.
Like I love you. I want to help you.
Yep.
Like it's not going to be about that. And then when I was dealing with those things, a big part of how I got out of that, I was not in a good relationship. And I eventually like came to mom. I was like crying. It was really stupid with what the issue was. But I'm like crying, and she's like,
But it was big to you at the moment.
it was.
And
It was.
so,
It was. It was. You know, I shouldn't undersell it. It was really a big deal.
Yeah, it was big.
And I thought there was no solutions. Granted, I was 16, but still, I thought there was no solutions. I thought there was no way out.
Yep.
I got to the end of my rope, and I'm like, Mom, I don't know what to do. And then she supported me. She assured me that like she loved me, and then she very calmly showed me just one possible solution. And I was like, oh, I never thought about that. And then I felt a bajillion times better. And then the issue was resolved in weeks.
Yep.
You know, and I was dealing with it for over a year.
Yeah.
So if you can, especially if you can have a parent or a family member, I just didn't want anyone young to hear that and be like, yeah, okay. No, it really, if your parent is in a place to do that, and if as a parent you are willing to do that, it's strengthened my relationship with her so much.
And I think the big thing too is with that, like you have to realize that even with like not getting good advice, or you go to that and like just saying it, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
Talking through it, the value of sharing that with someone that you trust. There's times where all of us, the three of us, like we've all sat and just unloaded, and the other person's just like, all right, man, yeah, that's tough. Like, I'm gonna pray for you, but like, you know, like I don't have a lot for you right now. Like, but still, just to be like someone to carry that with you.
Yep.
You know, like that. So yeah, Pastor
Well,
Matt.
yeah, and when you become and like you share those things and you're aware of those things, then you are more prone to accountability.
Yeah.
Because if Pastor Rich shares with me, hey, I've been struggling with this, I'll be like, a week goes by, I'm like, hey, how have you been doing with that?
Yeah.
Right? Because when it goes to last week when we're talking about community. When you're involved in somebody's lives, involved in community, those things become a part of your life.
Yep.
Right? If you are spending daily time with Jesus, then that's going to be a part of your life. It's the same way that like you're in community. It goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
I also think too, and maybe for the teenagers, you might not want to talk to your parents at all. And I understand that as somebody that struggled with my dad because we were so alike. He was like my best friend when I was a little kid, and then I became a high schooler and a jerk, and I wanted nothing to do with him. And now, like, my dad is, again, one of my best friends, and I can talk to him like that. But I had to go to other people, whether it be, like, my youth leaders or my youth pastor. I'm not just saying that so you talk to me, but but there are pastors here and people here that care about you. Think about people that are, like, spiritual fathers to you that, like Pastor Jordan said, that are emulating the things that you want to see in yourself, right? So that's something that is, even though maybe for Pastor Rich, a parent worked for him, if a parent doesn't work for you, well, you should, at some point, you know, your parents care about you.
I think it's important too that as pastors, I just want to say, and I know I can speak for the three of us, and actually every pastor on staff, it would never be a burden if I was asked if I could help somebody with something like that, big or small. I would be honored.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a privilege. Those are the things that we want to do.
Yep.
So if you're even struggling with like, who wants to deal with my mess? Like, no, you still have to find the right person, because I'm sure there's people out there that don't want to. But trust me, they're out there. Find them, and when you find the right one, it's going to be an honor and a privilege to work with you and to help you.
Absolutely. One of my here's the other big thing too, I think, for accountability is, let's just be honest, that we're human beings, and you have these spikes in spirituality that you're just in. You're like, this is, oh, dude, you know, you go to convention, you come on a Sunday, and sometimes God like just really does something awesome in your life, or maybe even like, oh, I'm gonna, maybe this you listening, you're like, you know what, I'm gonna start taking this serious. I'm gonna start listening to podcasts. I want to grow. You know, you're in that season of your life where you're really kind of spiking up. You're really trying. That naturally regresses. Mm-hmm. That just over time goes back. And one of my like, why I think accountability is so good is because it keeps you at that line. Yeah. You bring someone in, and now you're moving forward. Now that's a launch pad. That's not the top of the mountain. Now that's a launch pad to going up to that next, and that's where spiritual growth happens. And one of my favorite stories in history is Cortez, the Spanish explorer. You know, he comes to the New World. He got 600 guys with him, and they are just they're like, this is a lot, and they've got a lot of ideas on what they want to do. And what happens is they get over to the New World and they want to go back to Spain. They want to go back. Cortez hears about it. He starts to, a lot of these guys are starting to talk about going back. They've got families. They've got ideas of what they want to do. And, we've been on this mission now for however long it took them to get over here. It took a while, right? And now it's kind of coming back to it. Like, I don't know if I want to do this, Mm-hmm. And Cortez lights the boats on fire. He takes their ships and he burns them. And he's like, there's no going back. Mm-hmm. We're here now. And 2 years later, he succeeds in his conquest of the Aztec Empire. And I'm not saying I'm for that or anything. I'm just saying.
I'm for the Crusades, everybody.
No. We're not pro that. But what I am saying is, you're going to go down a path sometimes of that spiritual, I'm moving up, mm-hmm. I'm moving up, and then regression's going to happen. And you're going to need that person in your life. They'd be like, hey, what happened? Mm-hmm. No. Like, this is what we're doing. And it kind of brings me back to the book of Hebrews. Fix your eyes on Jesus, mm-hmm. the author and the perfecter of your faith. You see Peter on the water, and he says, if you tell me to come, I'm going to come, Jesus. And he gets out of the boat. And he starts to walk, and then he starts to look at the waves. And I think accountability, it's not foolproof. Yep. It's not this guaranteed, it's going to definitely get you from A to B. But accountability gives you a better chance. It raises it by 70%, as we're reading, right? To keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Yeah. And to not sink back into the waves that you created through your sin nature and the selfishness that exists in every one of our hearts.
And it truly is our nature to be inclined towards sin, right? Mm-hmm. And accountability, like we said, 70% had an impact of being freed of that sin. So I think that about wraps it up, guys. Thank you for giving us a listen.